What is the internet gonna do when they find out that this movie has elements that are really similar to Man of Steel? Freak out? Yeah, they're probably gonna freak out. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Davey Deathray here, back with another non-spoiler movie review. This time around, we're taking a look at Superman from 2025, written and directed by James Gunn. The way we do things here is I give you my overall thoughts, a brief description of the story and my thoughts on that, and then we break down the directing and cinematography, the acting, the visual effects, and the sound design and music before I give you my overall rating and closing thoughts. So let's get right into it. Real quick before we get going, please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on James Gunn's Superman down below. Alright, so when it comes to my overall thoughts, guys, I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I would. I grew up with the Christopher Reeve Superman, especially the first two, and I really like Man of Steel as well. I can't stand Superman Returns. It's really, really bad. That's for a whole different video down the road, but yeah, pretty rough one. And I didn't know quite what to think about this film. Some of the marketing was good, some of it wasn't so good, but I was hopeful that we were gonna get a solid story and a good launching point for the DCU, and I'm happy to say that I think that's what we've got. Now, is it perfect? No. There's certainly some things they could have done better, and hopefully as this universe unfolds, we get some of those things remedied, because I think we're pretty close, and I think the portrayal of Superman is great, and I liked a lot of what the characters have to offer, but we'll get into that a little bit more down the line. Now, as far as the story goes, we've got a Superman that is relatively young as far as his superhero-dom goes. And he's got a lot to learn about himself, about the world, about what's appropriate, all that kind of stuff. And on the flip side of Superman, we've got Lex Luthor, who wants to take Superman down, and he's willing to try whatever he can to make that happen, whether it's using the government or the media or worldwide conflict, whatever it is. And that's about as much of the story as I want to get into without spoiling anything. I know it might seem really basic, but I've seen a lot of non-spoiler reviews out there that start spoiling stuff right away, so I want you guys to go into the movie fresh and enjoy it as best you can. And when it comes to the writing side of the story, I don't think this is like too James Gunny. Like, it doesn't feel too much like Guardians of the Galaxy, although I know a lot of people probably want to jump to that conclusion. I mean, there certainly is humor here. I just don't think it's cranked up quite as much. There is something maybe a bit more wholesome in this movie as far as the humor goes, and I think it feels kind of like that Silver Age sort of vibe. Some people are saying like a Saturday morning cartoon, but there's some language, there's some really nice romance that was actually refreshing to see. And I think the writing here, other than a lot of elements being put into a movie that's just over 2 hours, I think the writing is pretty tight, but there is a lot going on. So, direction and cinematography. I think this is one of the elements that's kind of a mixed bag for me, honestly. There are some shots I really like. You do get some nice Superman kind of shots that gave me goosebumps to see, but they don't really hang out there long enough for you to truly soak them all in, but they certainly are there. I would say maybe half a dozen or so shots where you're like, all right, yes, classic Superman pose. I love it. It's not too much or anything like that. And a lot of the action is shot in a way that's really easy to understand and very well edited. However, I do think that the lens that they use, I'm guessing that's what it is, the lens, because some of these shots when Superman is flying, I'm sure you've seen them in the trailer, those head-on shots, they just don't look quite right to me. And I would say also, since there is something a bit cartoony about this, some of the direction feels like, I know the camera's not there. You know, I know that this is probably computer generated, so somebody's deciding where to put that camera, but it doesn't really feel like boots on the ground kind of camera work. So to me, the direction, while not bad, is just something that didn't really stand out to me. But I will say, yeah, some of those shots of Superman, awesome. Very, very enjoyable. And it's something that didn't distract me. I wasn't sitting there watching the movie thinking, oh, geez, what's with the direction? What's with the cinematography? It's just that there are other elements in the film that I think work better, and I just want to be fair. Let's move on to the acting. And guys, there are a lot of characters in this film, so I'm not going to be able to touch on every single one, but let's go ahead and highlight the mains and some of the characters that really stood out to me. Right off the bat, David Corenswet, awesome Superman, and a really good Clark as well. We don't get as much Clark as I could have used in this film, but that's okay because there is a lot going on, and he embodies all of the characteristics of both of those characters, or I guess the two different sides of what you want to see, although we do get mostly Superman here. But I love that he's got, there's confidence that's there. Then as the story unfolds, you get to see some of that self-doubt. But there's some really great character development here where he's got that realization moment. The moment where he knows who he is and knows exactly what he has to do. And I think David Corenswet does such a good job of portraying the whole gamut of Superman, Clark, and all of the emotions that character experiences throughout the entire film. And shifting from Clark/Superman over to Lois Lane, wow, Rachel Brosnahan is really good here, guys. I think this is my favorite Lois and one of my favorite aspects of the film. She embodies the character so well. Total spitfire, really good at her job, not afraid to get involved. If you don't know this, her father was a military general, so she's got spunk. And she's capable, and I love seeing all of these things on display in the film. And not only is Brosnahan a very beautiful actress, she is an awesome performer. Her eyes bring you right in. There's just something so gripping about her performance here. Whether she's being serious, or it's a little bit of a lighthearted moment, or a romantic moment, Brosnahan shines. I don't think she stole the show. I don't think anyone really steals the show here, but for me, a very bright spot, and I can't wait to see where the other movies in this cinematic universe take her character. That's how good she was. Okay, so we've talked about Clark/Superman, we've talked about Lois, we gotta talk about Lex Luthor, and I think Nicholas Hoult is pretty good here. I may be a bit tired of seeing Lex in these movies. Superman has a lot of other villains out there. We keep on getting Lex in most of the films, unfortunately. And my favorite iteration of live-action Lex is actually Michael Rosenbaum from the Smallville TV show. There's just something really complex and awesome about that character, and I really love the dynamic that he had with Clark. I thought it was just something different and really refreshing. Here we get your classic Lex Luthor, egomaniacal, petty, envious, the kind of, won't stop at anything sort of guy, and Nicholas Hoult does a really good job at delivering that character. It's not up to him to write the movie and write the story. I think he's very serviceable, and I think he does a pretty darn good job with what he's given, but it is your classic kind of Lex. There's no real surprises here, just a solid performance of a character I'm kind of overseeing in movies. A couple of other standout performances for me were Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, aka the Green Lantern, and I don't think we've seen this version of the Green Lantern on screen yet, which is pretty cool and new and different. Guy Gardner is a cocky dude. He's not the smartest guy, although smart enough to wield the power of the Green Lantern, but he definitely thinks that he is, how you say, the cock of the walk. And I love the portrayal here by Nathan Fillion. I think he captures the sense of humor and the levity very, very well. And the other performance here that almost stole the show for me was Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. Man, this guy is awesome. I will say this, the cool thing about the Justice Gang in this film is each one of these characters is very well defined. It doesn't feel like it's the same person that wrote all of the characters, which is great. And I didn't know anything about Mr. Terrific before watching this movie, but you really get to know the character as far as his temperament, his intelligence, what he's good at, what his superpowers are, and man, I've really enjoyed Eddie Gathegi's performances in other films like X-Men First Class. It's really cool to see him in here, and he has this like side quest with Lois, and it's these moments where I was like, oh, I love these characters so much. They are almost stealing the show, so I had to give him a mention here. But guys, there aren't any poor performances in this film. I think the entire cast does a great job. I just wanted to cover our mains and a couple of the standouts, but I would say the acting is one of the better elements of the film for me. And now it's time for the visual effects, and I am happy to report that the version of the visual effects that we saw in the trailers don't seem to be the finished product, because what I saw on the screen was so much better looking. Especially the fight scene in the baseball stadium. There's something about it in the trailer where it looked really rubbery and odd to me, and I think here on the big screen they must have touched some things up. It just looked a lot better than what we saw in those trailers. And you know, I had mentioned the flying shots of Superman from head on. I don't know if that's a VFX thing or if it's just a camera lens thing. To me, I think it's a lens thing, but I could be wrong. But I think overall the visual effects are really good here. This is also the perfect time to talk about Krypto, which is a character I really enjoyed in the film, and some people don't seem to either get it, or maybe they just don't want to enjoy it, or maybe they've never read any of the Superman comics. I don't know, but I think, you know, Krypto, in addition to bringing levity and everything, looks so photoreal and is so believable. And, you know, all the flying, all the crazy stuff that Krypto does, it looks great. And yeah, I mean, the visual effects here, I will say it looks like some of these things they shot because they knew they were going to put out a 3D version of the film. Maybe that's a little bit of a criticism, I don't know. But I do think that, you know, stuff like the kaiju monster and all that just looked like it was absolutely right there. There are, you know, shots of destruction in Metropolis and all that. Everything looks real. I think the VFX people did a really great job. And I think that's going to lean into a little bit about what we're going to talk about next, which is the sound design. Because, guys, if you know me, you know how I feel about sound. You know, if you don't have the right sound, it's not going to sell the effects. So let's scooch on over to sound design and the soundtrack. Yes, the sound design does it here. It sells the visual effects in a fantastic way. One of the first shots of the film is a really nice VFX shot mixed with a great sound design as well. So all of that just makes every little bit of the VFX believable for me. And I don't really have to go into it too much more. I don't think you guys know how I am about this sound stuff. So let's just scooch on over to the soundtrack and the score. I did really enjoy the score here. Of course, we've got a new rendition of the classic John Williams theme. And I think some of the other music from the score I enjoyed, although I don't really think it's as memorable as that theme. But man, the theme worked for me. Some of these moments where you get goosebumps, you're getting it because of the music. I will say this though, where James Gunn failed here is the soundtrack. He usually is great at the soundtrack. I think that most people, when they think of Guardians of the Galaxy, they think of those songs, you know, great soundtracks throughout those 3 films. But here, I didn't recognize very many of the songs, and during one action scene in particular with Mr. Terrific, there's a song that was used where I was like, what the hell is this? This is really bad. Like, I hadn't heard the song before, and it just wasn't catchy, and maybe one of the only times where like the music pulled me out. And I think the best thing that you can say about music in a movie is either that you don't notice it or that it sucks you in more. That's probably the best thing. But when it pulls you out, that ain't good. So I'm going to give the sound design top marks, and I'll say for the score and the soundtrack, definitely a mixed bag, but leaning more towards enjoying the score, not so much on the soundtrack. Well, we've covered all of our categories, and how does it shake out? Do I recommend you check out James Gunn's Superman in the theater? Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I mean, whether you're a classic old school George Reeves kind of person, or Christopher Reeve is your guy, maybe you love Dean Cain, maybe Brandon Routh is your dude, maybe it's all about Henry Cavill and the Snyderverse and all that, I still think you're going to enjoy what's on screen here. I really do. And I think it's something that the whole family could enjoy. There's some language there, so depending on how you feel about your kids hearing that, that's up to you. But I do think it's a very kid-friendly movie while still being very satisfying for adults. And I'm going to give James Gunn's Superman from 2025 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. I saw it in the Dolby Atmos screen, and tomorrow, I'm going to be up late editing this video, but tomorrow I'm checking it out in 3D IMAX, and I'm really excited to take it in for a second time and see how I feel after that. But I want to know what you think. Jump on into the comments down below and let me know your thoughts on Superman. Are you going to be checking this one out in the theater? Are your allegiances so aligned that you can't even bring yourself to check it out? Have you just been totally taken advantage of by all of these comic book movies and you don't know if you can love or trust again? Let me know in the comments, guys. Before we head out, want to give a big thank you and shout out to our Patreon members and YouTube channel members. You guys are so awesome. Thank you so much for everything you do for the channel. And for you folks that are watching, if you're curious about becoming a member, it's just 99 cents a month for YouTube membership, so think about it. Really appreciate you stopping on by and checking out the review. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this channel with someone who you think would dig this kind of content. And guys, there's a whole bunch of new stuff on the channel, more pre-recorded videos, a heck of a lot more shorts, and I go live all the time. Not only that, I love interacting with the chat and the community. It's always a blast when we kick it, so think about dropping in and hanging out. Y'all are awesome, and I'll see you soon. But until next time, I've been and will continue being Davey Deathray. Take care.